Hello and welcome to the iGeeks blog show, an Apple exclusive podcast where we talk about teeny tiny, every possible information about the Apple ecosystem. I'm your host, Harshanki, a marketing nerd who likes to eat, breathe, and survive on Apple content quite literally. In today's episode, we have a really special guest, Mr. Anthony Wilkes, waiting for us. But before that, do not forget to connect with us on our social media channels. We're available as iGeeks blog on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you want to connect with me or have any questions related to the Apple ecosystem, please feel free to connect with me on Instagram or Clubhouse. I'm available as Harshanki with an extra I. Moving on to today's episode, let's welcome our guest for the day, Mr. Anthony Wilkes, founder of the most popular apps that I've come across lately, PlayScore 2, proud son of a renowned computer scientist, Mr. Morris Wilkes, who has had an access to a lot of early computers, but I'm sure we're going to talk about it and hear some pretty exciting stories from him as we proceed with the interview. He's a man who's not just passionate about machines, but music equally soothes his soul. And that's why we have a lot of combinational apps out there. Hello, Anthony. Welcome to the iGeeks blog show. How are you feeling today?
I'm very well, thank you, and very pleased to be here talking to you.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for giving us the time to have this session with you. So tell us a little about your childhood first, because when I was going through your profile, I heard about Mr. Morris Wilkes, and that just blew my mind away.
Well, I had a childhood in the 50s. I guess I was born in 1950, and at that time things were amazing. Technologically, things were amazingly primitive. You hardly believe how primitive they were. People used to communicate to ships in Morse code, and computers hadn't been invented yet, or were just being invented. Right. And my father had spent the war doing radar. He was a radar buff in the UK, and when the war ended, he went back to Cambridge, his university, where he was appointed a director of a thing called the Mathematical Laboratory.
Amazing.
And that was actually had a differential analyzer, if people know what that is. But anyway, it was my father's idea to create a computer. And I mean, he knew a lot of the people involved in that at the Moore School in Massachusetts and other places. And he built this computer. It was operational. It could actually do computations in 1949, which is amazingly early.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You can see pictures of this computer online, EDSAC, EDSAC, EDSAC 1, and it looks so primitive. It's huge. I remember the building. It's huge. It's in several rooms, probably on several floors.
Oh wow, that huge.
I mean, I was only a kid and I didn't understand the implications, but what I did like is the fact that every few years the latest computer would be taken to bits to make room for the next one, and I would get first pickings of the bits.
How nice.
So I used to get these bits and take them home and make crazy inventions. Should I tell you about one of them?
Yes, please. Would love to hear that.
Well, the first one is EDSAC 1 had a panel of what we call peanut neons.
Okay.
Everybody knows what a LED is, an LED.
Right.
Well, before there were LEDs, there were peanut neons, which is just like a little bulb, a little tiny bulb with neon in it, and it works like a LED, operated by a high voltage. And there was a great panel, Baker-like panel of these things, and you used to make all sorts of crazy patterns and whiz around. It didn't have a lot of meaning. It was connected to the registers, but experts could tell what was going on.
Yeah.
And I sought after this thing. I wanted it so much. This lovely ball of lights, because there were no displays in those days.
Right.
And in the end, that was the first thing I went for, and I took it home, and I had a room which I called my lab, and I made this it's an electromechanical invention. So I could display waveforms and patterns and things on this thing, and it made a lot of noise and a lot of sparks, and was extremely dangerous.
Is it?
Another thing I had in that room was a harmonium, an old harmonium, which is powered by a Hoover.
Oh God! So it must have been fascinating. How old were you back then?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I might have been 10, 12, something
Wow,
like
that's
that.
pretty young, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yes. The Hoover was probably louder than the harmonium.
Was it?
It made a lot of noise. So that was my introduction to computers. I could tell you all sorts of other stories from that time.
That's no, no, that's quite a fascinating experience. But do you think having an early access to a lot of computers gave you an upper hand in understanding the functionalities and seeing the evolvement of computers to laptops or say mobile phones that we see today?
Well, I think living in the same family with my father did,
Mhm.
because I learned a lot of things from him. I learned a lot of physics from him,
Yeah.
a lot of mathematics from him,
Uh-huh.
and I, as I got older, I understood through him more and more what was happening, and going right through the evolution to time sharing, and then the first window displays from Xerox PARC. And my father was there. He knew everybody in the
Yeah.
industry and research, and so I got to meet a lot of them. And he was, I mean, he died at 97, and he was active right up until the end.
That's
Um, so that, I think that certainly helped me a great deal. Yeah.
amazing. He sounds like a very passionate, hardworking individual, and we see the characteristics in you as well. We've also heard that you are equally passionate about a lot of string instruments and music, and you pursued a career in that too.
Well, yes, that's true. Um, the first thing I was interested in is rock and roll, mainly what we call psychedelic music. People
Oh,
probably don't know
nice.
this.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
I had a band when I was a kid, and in fact, I spent 2 years between the age of about 16 and 18, pretty much constantly on the road with this band.
That's
It wasn't a
crazy.
recording band. It was the kind of band that goes around the country supporting big acts.
Yeah.
So I met quite a few of the big acts of those days, people like the Who, but we weren't the big acts. We were the little act, the little supporting acts.
I see.
So that was the guitar. And then when I got to 18, I suddenly had the feeling that I'm getting a bit old for this, and I thought I'd better take up a proper instrument. I mean,
Oh,
I know
okay.
that the guitar is a proper instrument, but
Right.
and so I took up the cello,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, and I was lucky enough to get a place to study at the old Cambridge Music School, um, with Caroline Bosanquet, who's quite a figure at the time,
Yes.
and I was there for a few years, and then after that, I got a place at Trinity in London and studied with Rohan Dasaran, the
Amazing.
Sri Lankan
Yes.
cellist.
Yes.
Um, and I I did a certain amount of gigging and so
Uh-huh.
on after that, and I was on the music scene, um, but I was starting to get interested in technology,
Mhm.
and I was particularly interested in at that time in computer evolution,
Okay.
um, and I was spending more and more of my time on that. And before long, I did another degree. I went to Manchester and did engineering.
Uh-huh.
Um, and just about the same time as that started, I started at my first startup
You
uh,
did?
with a pal of mine.
Mhm.
And that was making compilers, if you know what compilers are. A
You'd
compiler
like to
is
explain it to our listeners?
Yeah, a compiler is the thing which takes your program written in a high-level source language like Java or BASIC or something,
Okay.
and turns it into machine code that the machine can understand and
Mm.
execute.
Right.
And this is a vital piece of system software.
I
And
see.
we found a niche for this with the new personal computers, they were called,
Yes.
things like you know the Apple, the
Mhm.
first Apple machine, and the PET, the Commodore PET, and
Right.
all those. And they didn't have compilers. They had a basic interpreter, but they didn't have a compiler.
Oh, okay.
And our opportunity was that at that time people were using it for a kind of business and a
Right.
lot for science. These little computers, And there were a lot of programs out there, and they were written in BASIC, and they didn't run very fast. And a compiler could make them run faster.
Wow.
So our selling point was that you take your existing program and run it through our Gizmo, and it comes out running, I think, up to 40 times faster.
Oh, that's crazy.
And so that was my first startup. My second startup was, that went on for years and years, but I got interested in graphics.
Okay.
And this was sort of early 90s. And I was, at that time, I was crazy about the idea of VR, virtual reality, which wasn't
virtual reality back then.
Yeah.
What year are we talking about?
Sorry?
What year are we talking about?
VR, well, virtual reality, it was the idea of virtual reality that I was interested in, because virtual reality didn't exist at that time.
Right.
So, I mean, there were experimental systems, but they were incredibly slow and primitive. And what we did was to create a 3D graphics library, a bit like the libraries that people use, the SDKs people use to make VR games. And this was incredibly early, and this would run on some of these early personal computers. And there was a package called Amos 3D, which contained an object modeler, so you could make models and you know what I mean by models, 3D models, and display them and build them into your programs and that kind of thing. And that was pretty popular, actually. Now, I mean, it's wonderful what's happened now with virtual reality. I've got a couple of headsets here, and I'm wild about it. I think it's just wonderful what's happened.
It's incredible.
After that, I worked as an engineer for a number of American companies.
Oh, interesting.
And basically, until I had the idea for the music.
Yeah.
Which is what we're doing now.
So wait, I'll have to cut you off right there and ask you that all the two startups that you've mentioned before, they've somehow increased the speed tremendously of whatever activities or functionalities going on before then. So should I call you, say, Superman or Batman or a catalyst of sorts who was just increasing the speeds of the basic functionalities? Because this is pretty fascinating, right? Like if something is going at extremely smaller rate and you just come up with a compiler and increase the speeds to 40 times, and then you do the same with the VR headsets as well. That's pretty fascinating and pretty exciting journey. And then you mentioned you moved on to the music startups after working with the American companies. Yeah, so let's just hear something about that.
Okay, yeah. Well, I spent a couple of years. This was around early 2000s, and I was looking for a startup, for a bright idea, and me and a group of pals talked over all sorts of things, all sorts of ideas. We had an idea for a World Wide Web archive. It was the early web these days, and all sorts of other ideas, many of which somebody has done since. And then I had this idea. There's starting to be a lot of music on the web. You could see, obviously, you could hear things and play videos, but there was also a lot of printed music, and you could go to a web page, and you could get your computer to speak what was there, but you see a page of music, and if you couldn't read music, you had no idea what it sounded like. And I thought that was a natural part of the the natural part of the paradigm, a natural part of the web was you could do with music just what you can do with speech, And I thought how great it would be if you could just, press the play button.
Yeah, that'd be insane, right?
I mean, it's kind of the idea that, every sheet of music ought to have a little play button so you can play it.
That sounds,
I mean, everyone needs this. I mean, even if you're, a professional musician, I mean, and you sight read very well. I mean, you can sight read if you're an instrument, you sight read for the piano, maybe you can, score read a string quartet or something. But I mean, score reading, you can't score read anything. I mean, only the most brilliant people can do that. So even for good musicians, the ability just to play a piece of music and to click on one part and separate out the parts and play maybe the viola and the cello together, or
Right.
to kind of take the music apart or visually and move it around on the screen is
Right.
that's I thought that would be so wonderful to be able to do that. The way I figured the best thing to do would be to create an SDK, as I had done in the past with the graphics. Create an SDK so that people with other applications or people wanting to do things with musical apps and musical websites could build this in, and have that functionality. So that was the first idea. Well, to cut a long story short, because this kind of thing takes a lot of development. I started coding in 2006, maybe 5, 6, and we had something commercial a decade later.
Okay.
A decade later.
A decade later. Oh my God.
A decade. Yeah, 10 years. I mean, I did do some other things in between.
Of course.
One of those things was I wrote the musical handwriting recognizer in Notate Me. I don't know if you know the app. That's from a company called Neurotron in the UK. But anyway, I mean, it took a decade. And at that point, around 2015, we had an SDK, which people can buy now, or at least people can license it. And it's used for all sorts of things, like things maybe beyond what you would necessarily think of as as kind of musical scanning applications.
Right.
For example, it's in a couple of applications which are automatic page turners. So it knows when to turn the page because it can read the music, it can listen to the music and read the music.
Wow.
And another one, a Chinese company that as I understand what they do, it's possible to order from them using your phone camera. So you take a picture of the piece of music and you can order it.
Really?
Sorry?
Really? I'm not familiar that things like this have been happening. It just blows my mind the more information you share.
Yeah, well, I don't know how well it works, but that was the idea, and they've had they've kept the license up for a couple of years, so I guess it works. So that gives you an idea of the sort of breadth of applications,
right.
And also the regular applications for there's a very good application called Harmony Helper that helps singers in a certain way. It displays the music in a kind of MIDI form,
right.
And that uses our library. But when apps started coming on, when smartphones started coming along, then of course the penny dropped real quick.
That's right.
I immediately thought, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful? Just think of this: you take your phone, you snap a piece of music, and it plays instantly. I thought that was even at that point, I thought that was a wild dream.
It is.
I remember telling people about it, and saying, "Wow, if you could do that." I asked a few musical pals to take pictures with their smartphones of their music, and send it to me. And I had a look, and it absolutely horrified me, because, like, if you have a piece of music, I mean, it's got nice straight stave lines, it's nice and clean, black and white. But if you take a photograph with a smartphone, then it's a great woozy mass of curves.
Yes.
And a photograph taken up close is subject to a galaxy of visual distortions, and reversing all of those and making sense of it just to get to the first point before you do all the scanning thing. But anyway, I mean, we found a way to do it,
Amazing.
and it works. And we released the first PlayScore.
Mhm.
When was that? I don't know. I mean, 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. It was just called regular PlayScore.
Okay.
You can't get it anymore. It's been superseded. We call it
Oh,
PlayScore Classic now. It was
okay.
it was a 2-button app with a black screen,
Yeah.
and you just take a picture of your music, one page, and you'd play it. You know.
Amazing.
And we this even that was quite popular,
Yeah.
and but people used to complain like mad that you couldn't have multiple pages, you couldn't put a PDF score in it, and you couldn't export it. As that it was so it was a toy,
Right.
and so we decided, okay, we've got to do a proper app with this, and
Uh-huh.
exploit all the possibilities, and that's PlayScore 2. With PlayScore 2, you if you get a PDF, you buy a PDF score, you can just put that into PlayScore and it'll play it right away. Or
Right.
you take you take a photograph of your music, it'll play that, and you can separate out the parts. You can you can say, I'm an alto singer,
Uh-huh.
and uh, play just your part, or maybe with the other parts in the background. And you can choir directors can set up practice tracks for their singers,
Right.
and send them out. And well, there's so many things you can do with it,
Right.
uh,
Right.
for every sort of musician.
So, I have to ask you this: the journey from PlayScore to PlayScore 2 and perfecting a lot of technologies that were lacking in the app before. Now, what we see is something that blows artists and musicians' mind alike, right? Because even the idea of it seems impossible to non-developers or consumers like us. So the product that we see and once we use it just blows our mind. So I'd really appreciate if you could share how were the musicians or the artists responding to PlayScore 2, what were the reactions and things like that. You must have had a couple of interesting emails and feedbacks come across.
Oh, we've had a lot of interesting emails. We get a lot of feedback, and I absolutely love talking to users. Technical support is one of my favorite
Yeah.
favorite favorite things to do.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we get, well, I think the people who use PlayScore, well, a lot of them are singers.
Mhm.
There's something, I believe there's something like 40 million singers in North America alone,
Wow.
people who do singing of some sort.
Right.
And so singers, choral singers, people who sing in choirs, that's quite, that might be, I don't know, 30% of our market, maybe
Right.
more.
Right.
And we, I hear a lot from them, and I see all sorts of interesting scores.
Yeah.
That is tremendously valuable to us to have all the scores that people kindly send, because with every score we can make the app better.
Right.
And one one person I heard was the tenor, the Korean tenor,
Uh-huh.
Charles Kim,
Okay.
uh, and he's put online a series of videos of him singing. He's got a wonderful tenor voice,
Oh,
and
he has.
he's this was in lockdown actually,
Yeah.
uh, and he's got PlayScore playing passages from Tristan and Isolde, Wagner's
Right.
huge
Right.
opera Tristan and Isolde, and he's singing over. Uh, PlayScore is playing the accompaniment, and he's singing over the top, and these long videos of him. I've been talking to him recently. He's
Uh-huh.
got some great ideas actually.
Yeah.
So that was one interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, I talked to a lot of people. Another use, one of the main uses is people just use it, well, like Charles actually, as an accompanist.
Uh-huh.
So if you play the flute or you play the violin, you always used to have like me, I play the cello. I mean, if I'm doing a solo,
Uh-huh.
then I need an accompanist to
Right.
accompany me, and I've got an accompanist, but he's not here
Right.
24/7,
Right.
and
Right.
so a lot of people need that, and you
Uh-huh.
can. I mean, it's not like a human accompanist, of course
Of
it
course.
isn't, but it plays the notes and it plays the dynamics. It plays what the composer wrote,
Right.
and you you can have PlayScore play just the piano part, and you can play along to it.
Oh, that's
and
great.
a lot of people use it for that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And where do you think is PlayScore going ahead in the future? How do you see the app developing in the future? What exciting features can we see being added?
Well, the other big thing that PlayScore does is it allows you to export the music to score editors like MusicScore and Dorica and Finale, so people can take a picture of paper music, and all of a sudden they've got it in an editable form, and they can arrange it and change the key, and that's done using a thing called MusicXML, which is the kind of electronic lingua franca of music. And you export it to a score editor, and then you can do all these things with it. And that's surprisingly popular. A surprising number of people do just this, but in education, but also outside education. And one of the things that PlayScore is lacking at the moment is that it will transfer the whole of music, but not the lyrics, not the text, and all the directions. And that's what our next release is all about. Is going to do that. So when you take a picture and export the score, you'll get all the lyrics and all the other stuff too. So,
amazing. And how fast are we expecting the next release? When is it getting live?
Before the end of the year.
Oh, that's real soon. I would really want to announce it through our channels and help our listeners get to the early releases maybe. Do you have an early release or a beta release coming up anytime sooner?
That would be great if you do it. Yes. And another thing that's going to be new in that release is, speed of processing is really important. Like if you've got a big PDF or a lot of music, you don't want to sit there waiting. Or if you make some little change, you've got a page wrong and you want to swap it round, or you want to mask something out or something. You don't want to wait, while it reprocesses the whole thing. So I've always thought that speed is incredibly important. And today it's, you take a picture of a piece of music and it plays more or less instantly. But we're making it faster, and we're making it multi-threaded, so it uses all the cores. Because modern phones have not just one computer inside them; they have 4 or 6 or maybe even 8. Right. This new version is going to use every single core, and so it's going to be blindingly fast. So,
it's going to be faster than ever, probably the fastest one out there.
Yeah, it'll be faster than ever. Another thing about speed is that figuring out music, from a photo is something which takes time, and all the refinements we can put into it to make it do that job better, they all take more and more time. So if we can make the app really fast, that means that we can put more into it and make it work better.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Well, good luck with that. But I have one little question that a lot of us Indian listeners have been having for quite some time. We are trained with Indian classical music, which is very different from what your music looks like or your notes look like. Then how do we make the most of this app? We're waiting for a universal version of sorts where the app can understand our notes and, make music out of it.
It's our aim to cover as much of the Western notation system as we can, and we're increasing that all the time. We don't have any immediate plans to move on to other systems, and there are certainly things we'd like to. The one you mentioned, guitar tablature, and that there are certainly other things, and we would love to do all of that. But I mean, I can't tell you when that will be. There are an awful lot of things we'd really love to do.
Yeah, we'll be really looking forward to that, because when I talk about myself, I play sitar, which is an Indian instrument, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
And so we have our notations written in completely different way from the way you write. and would really be excited for something like that coming up for us who are familiar with Indian classical music. And if you look at the Indian audience as well, we have a huge market out there. I mean, we're the second largest country in the world. So there's a huge audience waiting for a creation like that from geniuses like you. Really looking forward to that.
Well, look, you please send me some examples. I love the sitar. I've played a sitar.
Oh, you have?
Oh
Amazing.
yes, I have. And I think it's a wonderful instrument. I'd certainly like to see some examples of your notation.
Absolutely. I'm going to send some notations right across through an email. And I guess we've had a lot of exciting things during this interview, but due to the lack of time, I'm going to have to move towards the end of it. But before that, when I listen to your journey or listen to all the experiences that you've shared in such a short span of time, you've done it all. You've had the hipster life, you've had the artist life, you've had the developer life, you had access to absolutely every technology out there from the 50s. So what is the one piece of advice that you'd like to give to, say, artists or developers today, and how can they make the most of the technologies right now and possibly develop a better future?
Oh, well, what can I say? I think dream the impossible. At least if you've got a real enthusiasm, if you are really longing to see something happen, that's I believe that's the key to doing it, whoever you are. So enthusiasm.
Believe in the impossible and stay curious always. That's going to get you to a lot of places. Well, that's a perfect way to end this interview. Thank you so much, Anthony, for joining us and giving you your precious time. We wish you all the best with all your future releases. And I'm surely going to send a couple of samples across and would love to stay in touch with you and keep our listeners updated with all the exciting releases that you have. I'm going to be attaching the links to all the videos that he's just mentioned and the link to the app. So please do check it out. And with that, I'm going to end this interview, but we're going to see you next week with possibly more exciting content, another developers, or unveiling a new Apple product. Till then, stay safe, stay connected. I'm Harshanki signing off, and I'll see you guys next week.